Hey everybody, this is Sheets, and we are now into week 11 of the Survivor Pool series. Hope you guys have been with us the whole way, because now it's starting to become time to cash in on all of the preparations we've done over the first 10 weeks. For those of you that have been with me throughout this whole process so far, there have been so many times throughout the course of the last 10 weeks where we've, avoided taking the biggest favorites, gambled a little bit. Well, I don't consider it gambling, but taking lesser teams with lesser winning chances in the name of number one, trying to get leverage on other players, other entries that might take more popular teams. Hopefully they get knocked out as a result, or setting ourselves up to have leverage on them in the future when all these other people just burn all of these really good teams. And then as you get into like the dog days of week 11 through 17, you'll find that people run out of teams pretty quickly. So I've been talking about this over the last 10 weeks is when you fade these teams that are going to be good for you in the future, especially popular teams, you have two ways to win, right? One is if they get knocked out, right when you avoid them, or if people just have no more teams left to play with. So we run a little poor with respect to getting guys knocked out. Like past couple of weeks, we faded hugely popular teams that just got extremely lucky to survive. Not the least of which was Green Bay this past week, who's about 50% owned, and they were just basically a coin flip towards the end. But you think about this, when you get to week 12 and there are only a couple of decent options. One of them is, and the clear-cut option is going to be Green Bay up at the top. All the people that took Green Bay last week, I mean, not only did they have to suffer through possibly getting knocked out, but now they're going to have to suffer extra in week 12 because they're running out of teams, right? So a lot of people use New Orleans already. Almost everybody used the Rams already, and Buffalo, and Miami. Remember a couple of weeks ago when we said, we don't want to avoid Miami. They were really popular, but it's probably a fade because you might want to use them in the future. All those people that burned Miami wish they had them available. There are going to be a whole bunch of people still looking at week 12 that take Minnesota this week that are going to ruin a chance to have them available for week 12 or 13 or something like that. So there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, a lot of ways to get leverage and, have good strategy. And I just want to also add that I've seen people just comment on my YouTube channel, just saying, hey, Sheets, I did this. What about this? Oh, I did this. And again, I can't give individual advice because I don't know who else is in your pool. I don't know what else you have left and all this stuff. And I just really wouldn't have time to do it. But I see what's happening already. Like I saw someone posted in the chat the other day. They said, ooh, glad I took Green Bay, just got by. You guys are all going to get really mad when I get to week 12 and I'm going to say, okay, let's just drop Green Bay on everybody. They're going to say, but what if I don't have them? Well, I mean, where were you when I was telling you guys to not play them in the first place? So yeah, I mean, if you screw up, you could certainly try to, get your way out of it still. But, that's why you got to be prepared and plan for these things in advance. Okay, so this week, it's actually a very, very easy week for me, but it might not be for everybody. Again, it depends on what you have left and how well you've done with stockpiling your picks and what paths you've created for yourselves and what type of pool you're in. If you're in pools that required double picks later on, hopefully you really stockpiled your good teams, in the future. Otherwise, you're kind of running out. So let's do the same process as we always do, and I'll give you a little bit of color on what's coming this week and the following 3 or 4 weeks. Again, we're looking for a combination of teams with good immediate expected value, that being good winning chances as determined by Vegas, and also lower owned teams because you have two teams of equal winning chances. If one is that much more popular than the other, you can get leverage on them. if they get knocked out. So the second thing is try to find teams that you're not going to want to use in the future, that fit your overall plan of how to get to the end, right? Winning survivor pools is a combination of going week by week, trying to get leverage on other entries, and also getting, good paths to the end that that you can finish and go 17 for 17. Or, depending on how many people are left in your pool, maybe you won't have to go week 17. Maybe you'll only have to go to week 14. So again, we're going to rank these teams over here on the left by expected value, and we're going to start that way. So again, you'll see, like, for example, if you scroll down a little bit, two teams with the highest winning chances, you'll see them ranked relatively low from an EV perspective, that being Minnesota and the Chargers. They both have 75% plus to win, but you'll see that their EV is maybe ranked 8th or 9th of everybody. And that's because you see one of them's 30% owned and the other one's going to be 40% owned. Okay. So, that's why, you're going to see, even though they have good winning chances, they rank really, really low on the EV meter. So we're going to get back to those in a second. Let's then just take a look at the top EV plays. You see kind of have a tie between Baltimore, Kansas City, and Pittsburgh, and you'll see why, right? That even though Baltimore and KC, they have 70% winning chances, almost nobody has them available. So that's why they only have about 1%, popularity, and that's why their EV is as high as it is. Pittsburgh, they are tied with them because they have incredibly high winning chances, like 78%, but they are somewhat popular. I guess they're 13%, but they're all tied as far as EV goes. And you drop down a little bit, you got New Orleans, who, despite losing Breeze, they still are a big enough favorite where, combined with their relative scarcity, very few people have them available, you're going to have a really, really strong EV play. And then you drop down to a team where, again, if you've been following my advice, you probably don't have them available anymore, but Tampa rates to be a good EV play also. And then you're going down to, say, Cleveland and Seattle, but these guys are much weaker than, from an EV perspective, than these other four or five. So, as we've discussed many times, that's not the end of the story, because you also have to consider what the future value of these teams are, how they fit into your plan. So, like, for example, Baltimore, as you can see, has incredible value out into the future. You could play them in week 13 at a 14-point favorite. You play in week 15 as a 15-point favorite, week 16. So you really want to save Baltimore if possible, especially in double pick pools. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, they have a little less, right? The only place you can really count on them is maybe week 13. So, Pittsburgh is definitely going to be a better play than Baltimore, by a decent amount. Kansas City, similar EV to Pitt, but again, they have really good future value out in 13, and then also out in 16, and also in 17. So I feel that between those three, I think Pittsburgh is clearly the best play. Okay. Because you really want to be saving Baltimore and Kansas City if you haven't used Kansas City already. There were a couple of weeks, I think 8 and 9, where, depending on what you did earlier, you were kind of forced into KC. And if so, you're cool. It's fine, because Pittsburgh, is really, really good alternative here, equal EV, and just maybe a little bit more future value. New Orleans, they have very minimal future value. I mean, you could play them in 12. Now, again, we talked about how tough week 12 could be, so might be, a decent idea to save them. But again, if you've done what we're supposed to and avoided Green Bay the past couple of times, you have Green Bay all ready to roll in week 12. So you don't necessarily have to save New Orleans here, right? So it's what we talked about, like New Orleans, you might think has future value, but if you've got Green Bay, The only thing that New Orleans does for you is give you flexibility, just in case something happens to Rodgers or in case Green Bay becomes incredibly popular, which they won't, because again, they've been used so much in the last couple of weeks that there's just not enough entries with them available to make them popular. So, well, let me pause this for a second. Sorry, I forgot where I was. I had to take a call. But I think we were talking about these teams and their future value, I suppose. But yeah, so we were talking about Green Bay. I suppose that they were really good value in 12, so we have them available, so we don't have to worry about playing New Orleans. I guess that's where we're at. So Tampa, if you somehow do have them available, you still probably don't even want to use them because they have some value in 14, but I just mention it because of their EV here. So let's talk about these guys, this Minnesota and LA, all right? Because here's the case for taking them. I really actually can't think of any case for taking Minnesota because their EV is terrible, because their popularity is so big. And you can take them in 13, you know what I mean? So it's not as if, they have no future value also. And you'll see 13 is no bargain. Like if you didn't save Kansas City, let's say that you don't want to use Baltimore, you're going to push them out to 15 and you use Pittsburgh, all you're going to have is Seattle and Minnesota are choices. So you're going to want it, so you could save them. I just don't see the need to take them this week. I mean, you're just giving up so much with these negative EV plays. I just think it's bad. So here's the deal with LAC, all right? If you take LAC, you're making a terrible immediate EV decision, but at least they have no future value, okay? Although even still, you could make the argument you could use them out in 16 if some of these other teams you don't have. But so you could make the argument you could swallow a little bit of chalk this week by taking the Chargers, but I don't want to give too much of what I have personally going away, but I don't need them, man. I mean, like, because of the teams that I've saved, I mean, I don't need to worry about the future value of not needing LAC anymore. I mean, I could probably go ahead, like, for example, I have one pool, a couple where I can get away with, now think about this for a second, like Pittsburgh here as the biggest favorite. All right. I saved Green Bay, so I'm going to have them as the biggest favorite in 12. 13, there are some variations where you could have Kansas City available, but at the very least, I could have Minnesota available if I fade them here. And then reel it right back in 14, Seattle. That's presuming also, you think about this. In 13, everybody and their grandmother is going to take Seattle. And so here I'll get 14. In 14, I'll get Seattle a little lower owned as an enormous favorite. 15, yes, if you say Baltimore could use them, but if you remember all the way back in week 4 and 5 when the whole universe took the Rams, and I said, we're going to fade them because you never know when you're going to need them. Well, in 15, we're going to just destroy people with the Rams. That's what we've been waiting for. And then, for example, if there's anybody left that burned Baltimore here, well, here I am waiting in 16 with Baltimore to lay the freaking bomb on them. Then the pool will probably be over. But then even at 17, there's all. I don't know if I have Indy available for that, but you could finagle this around where at the very least you could have a Buffalo play. I mean, you could. So you don't have to worry about, like, I can't think of any reason why some of my entries will use LAC. There's literally no reason. But okay, if you don't have this clear path available to you, then yeah, maybe you have to use LAC. So I just encourage you to just look at your own paths to victory and see if you can get to the end, without using a low EV team, a high popular team like LAC or Minnesota, right? So what I'm doing, I mean, this is in most of my pools, I'm gonna be all over Pitt. I'm gonna probably burn some New Orleans also. I'm not gonna. Now again, it depends what kind of pool you're in, but there are some variations where Cleveland can be an okay play. I'm not gonna go there just for my number of reasons. But what you don't want to do is I really don't think you want to take Minnesota. I really think you don't want to take LAC. I think you just want to, if you've done what I've said, you're going to have at least New Orleans available or Pitt. You take one of those two at 1% owner. Well, actually, Pittsburgh 13% ownership, but when New Orleans at 1% ownership and and then hope that Minnesota and LAC lose, you almost win the whole pool in one day. Um, so that's it. I mean, and you'll see that the choices that we've made in the past are now kind of, you know, not forcing, but at least really funneling your plays to certain things. So the options are going to become less and less because we've actually planned for this already. Like I know that if I don't get knocked out, right, who I'm going to have pretty much throughout the course of this. Now things could change, people can get injured, people can get COVID, all this stuff. And or maybe the way to structure the pools are such that one team might be particularly available to people, and you might have to pivot. We'll talk about that as we get closer. But overall, man, although we haven't gotten paid off immediately, we've really set the table for just sweeping up EV every week as we kind of just come down the stretch. All right, I hope this has helped, and yeah, hopefully we'll get it done, and we'll definitely get after it next week.